Hi, everyone, and welcome to Our Collective Experiences. I'm Sean, and today I'm joined by the wonderful, amazing Robin Lassiter, who wrote this amazing book, Earth, A Love Story. If you haven't read it, I highly, highly recommend it. It's probably one of the best experiencer books out there. It's like reading poetry. I know for myself, when I was listening to it, because Robin has it on her podcast, it was probably one of the biggest emotional impacts for myself along my journey, because I was going through some very tough times. So, Robin, thank you so much for joining us. And how are you?
Thank you, Sean. I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, I'm great. I'm excited to talk to you. Thank you for hyping up my book. It's fantastic. Appreciate it.
It's not a hype, because it's actually it's friggin' fantastic. I try to tell everyone I know all about it, because I think it's just awesome. And I really love your podcast as well, because I think it's very, very special. And yeah, I just love it. Just for everyone who doesn't know, Robin actually did my own personal regression, where I ended up talking with Ra, which was a whole other story. I was just on your podcast, and we talked about that. So keep an eye out for that. But to start, I kind of want to start off. I know we're going to get into some heavy emotional stuff. So I actually wanted to start off a little differently today. And I wanted to talk about TV shows that have made an impact on you. So to prepare for this, I decided to watch Sense8 and Andor, because I remember you mentioning how much you love those two TV shows. So I'd love to talk to you about those, and we'll start off nice and easy and go see where this goes.
I love that. First, what did you think of them? Yay and nay?
So I had originally watched Sense8, the first season, and I think half of the second season when it came out years ago. And I really liked it then. It hit differently this time. And in a very interesting way, because now, back then when I watched it, I didn't realize I was empathic or having any of these experiences, because I was in that dull phase, like that low phase where it really wasn't having any experiences, and it was pre-NDE, so pre-flip. So this one, I was like, holy shit. Some of the stuff that was happening, including my own life, my relationship with my partner, all this, I was just like, holy shit. Now, I'm glad I rewatched it. It was awesome. Yeah. And then Andor, man, I just loved it, because it was like, fuck the Empire. And, and I was like, yeah, this is exactly what I wanted to watch. So I was just kind of curious about your thoughts on it.
Yeah. I mean, Sense8 the Wachowskis are one of my favorites, right? They did obviously The Matrix, and
best documentary ever.
Best documentary ever. That's correct. And Sense8 is feels like a documentary lately also. And one of the reasons that I love it, one of the reasons is that it's told through the lens of all these really different people that we don't see a lot in overculture media. And so that's great to see. And also, something that I've experienced in the last couple of years with very tight knit community is this, what I call the we space. You know, it's moving out of sort of an individual sense of self that is contained and closed into this experience of connection with other people that is unlike anything that I've experienced up until this point in my life. So shared dreams, shared synchronicities, shared altered states that are really, really difficult to describe. And it's only through close connection when we talk to each other that we even know that this is happening. You know, you really have to keep up with somebody pretty closely to know that you shared a dream. You know, you have to report these things to each other regularly. And so that the collective we space that seems to either be coming online or that I have more and more access to, Sense8 is great for that, to connect into that. And it's so ultimately hopeful. And I'm not I work really hard not to have an external enemy, not to think that it's us versus them or somebody's out to get us or anything like that. But also it can be really fun and invigorating to have a fuck the empire kind of vibe. And Sense8 brings that as well. So
yeah.
And Andor is my favorite Star Wars creation. It's a very quiet, deep look at power structures and how we get used to them and what options that we have. And I'm not a fight the system kind of person. I much more lean towards creating something new rather than fighting what exists. But I have that part in me. And so it sparked that as well. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, I love that. So I used to be like kind of like the anarchist, the fuck the empire kind of thing, and now I'm starting to move into this, like creation is rather than fighting, because or at least changing from within, whatever organization you're in or whatever. That seems to be a pattern for me in the last 2 or 3 years, where you're inside an organization and you have to. There's a bit of struggle and sometimes a lot of struggle, but there's this, you have to change from the inside, and it's a good reflection of my inner. It's also reflected on the outer. So I was wondering if you find with your new position, with how you're doing with like the podcast and all your different retreats and your business now with hypnotic regressions, do you find that the people that you're encountering is a reflection of also your own journey? Are you seeming to get more people that are closer to your own or on the opposite spectrum?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. What I'll say is, like, throughout my journey of integrating the reality of being an experiencer, the more, the safer I felt, the more stable I became. My reality reflected that, certainly. And it does seem, it's hard to say, which comes first. Like, are people coming to me and connecting with me because they resonate with what I'm saying? And that's why there's a familiarity, and that's why they're being reflected back to me? Or is there something more subtle happening? I think probably both. Yeah. I'm allergic to like new age stuff, and I'm sorry about that. But like the word, it's just been so overused, and like the word manifestation and stuff like that. It's real. It exists. And also the way that it's been, talked about and used is, doesn't resonate with me. And so it's difficult for me to say, like, it's not an easy answer. It's not like, it's not a direct reflection. It's not a one-to-one, but I would say overall, yes, like the healthier that I become internally, it's definitely reflected in my external world for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, there's a lot there to unpack. I'm not sure how we would, but kind of moving forward, now that you've done a lot of this emotional work, could we talk about the emotional body and how you view that now versus maybe even a couple of years ago?
Yeah. It's, I've been saying lately that it's such a strange thing that this started with like contact with non-human intelligence and UFOs and lights in the sky and ends up at the emotional body. It's weird. It doesn't seem congruous, but it's absolutely been the journey. And I think ultimately it's about being human. It's about our humanity and who we are and what parts of us we've forgotten or have been dormant for a while. And it feels to me that the emotional body has come online in the last few years, maybe collectively, maybe just for me and some folks that I know, in a way that it wasn't before. And a lot of that has to do with just spiritual bypassing and repressing feelings, and spending much of my life as an addict and alcoholic. And the worst thing in the world was to feel a feeling or, have a sensation or feel something difficult. Like it's hard. And I did a lot to try to prevent that. And so it's been a journey of reclaiming all of the emotions, the things that we say are hard or bad or negative. It's a really tender journey to go into that. Grief was a huge alchemy for me. It was a huge transformational portal for me. And I came to believe through that process that like feeling and experiencing these things that are difficult, particularly grief, is really is a really powerful one. Turns us into real people. I couldn't go to funerals before. I couldn't reach out to someone who was suffering for a lot of time in my life because I didn't know what to say to them. And it was very much about me. I was very uncomfortable with it. And then going through this process has given me tremendous capacity for other people's suffering and compassion for that. So I feel like I can be with people in their grief and suffering. And that's the massive gift of the emotional body. And so the way that I've come to think of it is the physical body, which is also coming online, I think, in a way. I think for a long time we like walked around as heads, and we're still doing that quite a bit. We're just in our mental space. And now the physical body, the emotional body, and the nervous system that weaves them both together all seem to be coming online and asking for attention. And it's almost like learning a new language. We sort of don't know how to do it. Somatics has emerged in recent times, and I think that that's a great resource to learn how to be with our physical and emotional bodies. And I think that it's part of our evolution, and I think it's going to be needed as we go through the next, the rest of our lives. I'll say, we face really uncertain times, and I think we're going to need access to as much as our body intelligence as we can. And as well, not leaving behind rationality, not leaving behind the mental body in any way, but adding these other sensing systems that are very powerful.
Wow. Yeah, I 100% agree with that because so I've been thinking about how maybe before the last civilization, because I always feel like that what's been coming up for me a lot lately is the Atlantean and that sort of stuff, and about how that was much more like an emotional time versus right now, which is much more mental. And it feels like we're going towards this amalgamation of the two, finding the balance between it's like the yin and the yang, which seems to be like a super common theme for me, is about finding balance, finding this liminal space in between. And when you were talking about addictions and grief, I think we don't pay enough attention to addictions because we always focus on the really big ones. So like you've talked about in your podcast and in your book about drug addiction, alcohol addiction, a whole bunch of different addictions. But like for myself, I've come to realize that I have some other addictions that aren't necessarily like that, but are just as detrimental. So I was addicted to feeling like self-loathing, right? And self-sacrifice, all these different addictions that are really hidden. I was just wondering if you would be able to talk about some of the coping mechanisms or paths of healing that you were able to use that you thought were really instrumental in your healing of these.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. Yeah, there's a spectrum of all of these things, right? Like for me, at the core of it is just not being able to bear life, not being able to bear the reality of life, the reality of grief, the reality of suffering. Dude, therapy, like I went to therapy. That really helped. I didn't understand why I did certain things or why I was the way that I was, and finding a really good therapist to just help me walk through that and give me some perspective was really helpful for me early on. It ultimately was grief that built the capacity to be willing to turn towards the hard things. And it's part of my, like, turning towards the hard thing is part of my story. It's something that I learned early on, like, okay, my life's a mess. The situation is rough. I don't know where to go. If I can just get the courage to turn towards the hard thing, the thing that I don't want to turn towards, it progresses the narrative. It progresses the story. And so that was a tool that I had in my toolbox. But I could not turn towards my own agony, and there's a reason for this. Like, we hold a lot of trauma in our bodies, and it can build up to the point that it's that we feel like we will be overcome by it. And it's possible to go into these things too quickly and re-traumatize ourselves. And it's like learning to sit with the discomfort. And it sounds like such a simple thing, but as my awareness of addiction has grown more subtle over time, because it's very easy to be like, I'm clearly an alcoholic, 100%. I'm clearly addicted to cigarettes, to nicotine, 100%. Easy. It's trickier to be like, oh, I'm addicted to this, like you were kind of saying, like this thought pattern, this belief system, this construct, this way of being. And it's serving a purpose somewhere, right? Or served a purpose in the past somewhere. It was a way to cope or keep safe or something at some time. And being able to begin to see that and then make different choices around it and not feed into the desire to collapse the narrative. Like you were talking about staying in the liminal space in between. I think that, Stuart Davis told me one time, that that may be the price of entry to kind of the new way of being on the planet, is being able to hold the paradox and to hold the discomfort, hold the tension of the liminal space. And it's way easier said than done. It's really can be very, very difficult, but I know a lot about, I know some of your story, and I was actually just editing our podcast episode. So it will be out soon. But I know that some of your story includes this stuff as well. It's dark, it's heavy. It's not easy to make these changes. Yeah.
No. And then it's, I find, it feels like we're developing a new path, for the next. So I always have this feeling of like waves, and that we're all parts of different waves of the same ocean. And then like it feels like for like myself, it feels like you're part of the same wave. And there's a couple of others too, that feels like the same kind of vibration, where we're starting to develop more clearer paths, maybe, for others to maybe follow in how to heal, because I know for myself it's been a shit show, like a real shit show, trying to figure out like where do I go. It was like the shotgun method of like, okay, I'll take a little bit from shamanism, I'll take a little bit from hermeticism, I'll take a little bit from Buddhism, I'll take a little bit from here, I'll take a little bit from there. And one of the biggest things that like I really liked what you were talking about is grief. And I think in North America, like we just push away grief super fast, and in Europe, that we don't actually give it the proper attention. And I find now I really want to. You can't skip those stages of grief, even though I really wanted to, because I found now that for myself, just like you're saying, the spiritual bypassing, like you can skip it, but it's going to come back like even harder next time, because it always comes back. It's that wheel kind of thing. I was wondering about some of do you have any advice for going through grief? and the best way to cope it, other than, well, even with just facing it. I know it's way easier said than done, but do you have any maybe some advice on particularly when you're in that middle of that storm, what helps you push through?
Yeah. I mean, so many different things. I don't think we were ever meant to do it alone is one thing, so finding really safe, good community who can be with us in grief is tough, honestly. Like that's tricky, because we don't really know how to do it. We've forgotten how to do it, but not doing it alone is a huge thing. There's a book that I recommend to everybody, which is called The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Frances Weller, that really talks about grief in a way that is empowering and inspiring and doesn't skip around any of the kind of shattering that grief can bring. What to say about how to engage with grief? Yeah, it's building capacity a little bit at a time, giving ourselves a break when we need a break. Yeah, how to be with grief. It's really tricky and it's difficult. It can definitely feel overwhelming. I think that's what I was going to say. I think having context is really helpful. And where I found context was in myth, right? Like if we go to, which I know that you love, Sean, like the hero's journey, I know that that's really important to you. And for many years in my life, really important to me too. Give some sort of framework. Like so often in these, like we're sort of lost in the woods on a journey, and just to be able to read something and read something that says, oh, if you're on a path, you're not really on the path, and go, oh God, I'm supposed to be lost in the woods. Okay. Like, at least I know somebody's been here before, and this is a very human thing. And we know that there is a sort of guide through this. And then once you know the hero's journey, it's everywhere. It's in every TV show. It's in every movie. It's in every novel. It's in every story. So really powerful. And I would say that the myth for grief for me was the descent of Inanna, and continues to be the descent of Inanna. So Joseph Campbell talks about the hero's journey, going out, having a quest, works well for grief as well, because you go into the dark cave, you face the hard thing, you find the elixir, you make your way back, which is a journey all of its own, and then bring that wisdom back to the community. Like, it's a really beautiful, powerful story. The descent of Inanna is similar, except she goes down and in. So she goes down into the underworld to meet her, to be with her sister who is grieving the death of her husband. And nobody gets out of the underworld alive. And what her sister is holding down there is grief, rage, pain, a lot of the emotional body that has been associated with the feminine, that's kind of been, put down into the underworld. Like, it's not, culturally, we don't center these things as being okay. Like, nobody, it's much more of like a pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You could have it much worse, just get your shit together. Like, that's our cultural narrative around this stuff. And 100%. This myth is not like that. This myth is like, go down and meet it, and know that you're going to get, the story is that she goes down and her sister kills her and hangs her on a meat hook on the wall. Like, you don't get out alive. It's a really, anyone who's dealt with grief knows how shattering it is. And so something does die, and we do transform, and we do let something go. And then we come back up, and we do have the elixir for the world. Like, it's a very similar story. And Inanna goes on purpose. There's a lot of mythology where people or entities, being deities, are dragged into the underworld. And Inanna is the one that goes on purpose to go meet this thing. And I think that also makes it a really powerful myth for our time, because we're being called to that. I often think, like, if we actually let the grief and suffering of the world touch us, if it happened to everybody at the same time, like, every gun would be put down. We would just all go up and feed our neighbors. Everything would transform in an instant if we really felt the grief and suffering in the world. So I think it's the medicine and the myth for our time. Yeah.
Yeah. I really love that. I find when I was listening to you, it's that it's almost like every time we visit the underworld, because I don't think that's the one thing I found with the hero's journey. Like in the very first time, I was like, oh, it's only once. That's not. I can do this, but it's this re-entering. Right. It's the cycle, right? You're re-entering, and you're dying. And we talked about this on your podcast. I don't think I'm the same person. I think I died down there. I don't think I'm the same person that came out of that. And it's the story of Inanna kind of reminds me of the phoenix. Like you're constantly rising from the ashes, which is kind of funny because I have a tattoo of a phoenix that I got at 18. I had no idea why I got it when I was 18, but now at like 38, it's making a lot more sense.
Yeah.
And and I find that this what you were really saying about how the different perspectives, and I think that being able to have this journey multiple times allows us to come back up and experience more and more perspectives in order to be able to connect with others on a more emotional and deep level. Because without perspective, you just can't connect. And I find that like especially in the experiencer community, like the experiencer group and stuff that we're both part of, I find that a lot where you don't have to preface it with, I know this is crazy, but, or anything like that. You can just talk about your experiences, and there's a lot of empathy and understanding because they've either just started it or they've already gone through a journey or multiple journeys at this point with this understanding. And I'm wondering that, do you feel a shift coming? And the reason I ask you is because I feel a shift that's coming. I can't place a date on it or anything, but it feels like there's a definite momentous shift for us as humanity, like for humanity itself.
Yeah. Yeah, this is always a kind of interesting and tricky topic for me because I've, as an experiencer, I'm curious about your experiences as well. From a really young age, being shown scenes of, I called them my Armageddon dreams. These dreams of destruction and often like nuclear war or, tidal waves, explosions, refugees. All of these things, very powerful imagery. And then always this sensation that I was supposed to do something about it. This something like something's coming. It's imminent. Do something about it. Get ready. From the time I was 4 years old. And so, so when 2012 came around, right? Or even before that, 2001, like Y2K, I was like, oh God, here it is. It's happening. Right. Yeah. Like it's finally, and then it didn't. And then 2012 came and it didn't. And, so, and during that time, during like the first 10 or 15 years after 2000, there was a lot of that. If you were in that community, there was a lot. If you were in like the new age spiritual, like a Facebook spirituality, there was always a date, right?
Yeah.
11/11/11 was going to be a thing. And like, not to say that it wasn't, weirdly, because I did something really powerful on 11/11/11 because of that date. And I did change my entire life in 2012 because of all of the intensity and prophecy and everything that was going on. That's when I, gave away all of my possessions and lived in a yurt for 2 years. So it was impactful for me in my life, but was it the thing, So it's been very tricky now to parse out, like, yeah, I do feel something coming. I do feel an urgency. And I felt it my whole life. So it's hard. It's difficult. So that's my caveat. And at the end of the day, if, you twist my arm, it's like, yeah, I do feel something coming. I'll say this, that for many, many, many years, it was Armageddon dreams. And now it is apocalypse dreams. And apocalypse, the word apocalypse means like an unveiling or a revealing. Yep. And it's not, it's different than the Armageddon dreams. So I kind of think we're in the apocalypse.
Yep.
We're already in it. There's already an unveiling happening. And what it looks like moving forward, I don't know, but it feels harder and harder to deny that something is coming. And I also I try really hard. I fail a lot, but I try really hard to keep both feet on the ground because of the number of times that I've had this sensation that didn't manifest into whatever we think it's going to be. It may be something that is quieter than we think, or maybe not. I don't know. What do you think? Are you someone who's had lifelong like Armageddon dreams?
So I had some when I was really small. And then I pretty much didn't have many, but I've always had this feeling too. And then right after my NDE, I had a shared Armageddon dream with my dad, which was really weird. Which is, I think it's episode 2 or 3 that I did. And in that one, it was, my parents had just bought a piece of property. So the farm, like my favorite place. And it was like clearly after some type of an event, and there was this feeling of that a collapse had happened, and that there was like a reason to be defending and stuff. And before, so like when that first happened, and then my dad had the continuation of that, and he ended up continuing the story right when mine ended. It was really weird. That was the first shared dream I'd ever had, and it was very weird that he had continued it. And at the time, that's made me make certain choices in preparation and all this stuff. And I think what I've realized recently, and then this is where I'm sitting right now with all the shift talk and all this stuff, is that it's kind of like the message I got on my NDE, where it was like, this is your last chance. It's something that I needed to hear in order to have the bravery to make certain choices to change my life. And I think, and what I've been noticing about my patterns of where I'm going in my life is getting more to back to basics and stepping away from the society that we've created, utilizing technology still, but in a much more trying to get back to kind of like how you're living. And I feel like this is something that maybe that we've needed in order to kind of course correct us back to where we're getting back to being more in touch with the land. And I've noticed with myself specifically, like I just talked about this with my partner today, was about how I'm starting to notice that during the winter months, I really want meat and potatoes, like root vegetables. And now that we're in spring and summer now, for me, now all I want is salads and maybe like some chicken, or maybe I don't like fish, so avoid that. But I think it's about trying to get back in tune with the cycles. And so I'm starting to get less and less worried about whatever might be coming. And I'm starting to wonder if it's more a push and also symbolic. My partner was saying today that she was wondering if the shift, and we always talk about like a pole shift or some type of cataclysm, is more a metaphor for what's the shift that's happening inside us, and that there's going to be a collective shifting, and maybe that's what we're feeling. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I love that. Yeah, I really love that. I mean, that's what I know that there were, for me and for a lot of other people in the 90s, there was this feeling that we were going to kill the world, that nukes were coming. Like, do you remember that sense, that World War III was imminent and we were going to destroy the world? And I feel like, I've sometimes wondered if the dreams that we get, and a lot of people get them, are to do just what you're talking about, either to inspire a collective shift that doesn't have to include that, or to, this is my more kind of wild esoteric idea about it, but that it enables sort of a timeline shift, right? So that we don't have to play out that potentiality, that we've seen it, we know what it looks like, and we see the destruction and we see all the suffering and pain. And so we choose a different timeline. We collectively choose a different timeline. I've thought that about that time, because I don't know if you felt this, but at some point I was like, oh, we're not in that place anymore where that's the imminent thing that's coming. Now we're in this other place. It's, we're shifted into a new timeline. So I love that. It's nice for my nervous system to think that it's representative of an internal shift, or is something similar to what's happened in previous times in my life. I'm not living the way that I live because I'm prepping, I do think that there's a call. Yeah, there's a call to get close to the land, like you said. I think that that's true. I think that's very true. I think the earth, our physical body, and our emotional body are all tied and connected, and are coming online in a way that we haven't experienced in our lifetime. That's pretty remarkable, and like subtle and weird and hard to talk about. And it's experiential more than intellectual, and but it's all tied together. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I love that. It's funny that you were talking about this shift. So this morning, and I find I get most of my downloads, or I don't know if they're visions. It's that hypnagogic state, or the one where you're waking up. And I seem to get them mostly around then. I don't know if it's because I'm more in touch with the intimate then. But this morning I had one where I had this vision of us. So it was myself, my partner, and a bunch of people that are in my meditation group, and we were semi-translucent, and there was these other people that I didn't know that were standing right beside us, and they shifted 90 degrees. So like their Earth shifted 90 degrees while ours stayed the same. And a couple of years ago, I got to say, I would have been like, that's fucking batshit crazy. And now it's getting less and less. Which I think is even crazier, because
yeah.
And I really wanted to bring up something. So I just watched a recent, and I haven't been watching very many indie videos. I think I've watched less than 10 ever. And I watched one recently that was on Beyond, but with Heather Tesh. And she had a gentleman that died, and he was dead he was in a coma for a couple of years. And what he saw was a shift. So there was almost like two worlds. And this kind of reminds me of Dolores Cannon as well, where there's two worlds. One that they couldn't even see each other, because the shift has changed so much. And on the one world, it was like this. It was full of fear, of power struggles. The cities, people that were really scared were moving into the cities because they had no idea how to be self-reliant, all this different stuff. But then the other ones, they made these other cities that people were gathering in. And they were in I think he said they were in one of the Fibonacci sequence, like they were spread out. So I was bringing that. I would love you to talk about the Bridge Collective and see where that's going.
Yeah, thank you. I want to, can I comment on the shift and the two worlds and real quick? Yeah, before I go into that. I don't know. I'm a little bit older than you. So I was immersed in all of that, the shift and the two earths and the split and all of that has been talked about for a really long time, right? Like that's in the collective. And I've always wondered about it, and my view of it has changed over time. And now what I think is that let's see, how do I say this? I feel like each of our realities is real and distinct, and that reality has split and separated into 8 billion realities, right? And then there are these collectives of realities where people share ideologies or belief systems, and we create a collective reality. And that's sort of how I've been thinking about like the shift or the split or this dual earth thing. We can see it in very prosaic ways, just core belief systems color our realities in the way that we looked at the world completely. And so we are really walking around having completely different experiences on this planet. Everybody, especially with media bubbles and social media, and it's not like it used to be. We used to all watch the same TV show on Thursday night, all of us. Except for like the anarchist punks who were hanging outside, but they were all doing anarchist punk stuff. They were all doing the same thing too. And we're not doing that at all anymore. It's a completely different world where reality has fractured into all of these, different, worlds, and they're all real. Even if they directly contradict each other, they're real. And so that has been how I've been thinking about kind of the split, is we are experiencing reality in a different way than we used to. And we're all cohabitate, like we all live on the same planet. We haven't gone anywhere. And yet we're having wildly different experiences of reality, which maybe always was there, but certainly in the West, it wasn't like we were all kind of doing the same thing for a really long time. Now we're doing all wildly different things. So, thanks for asking about the Bridge Collective. It's it's kind of talking about this stuff, that there's, let's see, how did this first come to me? Yeah, just seeing clients and interacting with friends and people who are in these kind of worlds and communities, and seeing that there is a collective of us who, through the physical body, through the emotional body, through a connection with the earth, through this like new sort of language that's coming online that we don't really even know how to contextualize or intellectualize at all, that we're bridging to a new world or a new way of being, a new way of being human on the planet and in relationship to the planet and to each other. And it's new. It's not about going back to a time when, we're living in peaceful villages, which honestly never happened. That wasn't our history ever. Humans have always been humans. And so it's not about going back to some like idealized past. It's actually about going forward and becoming something new. And we don't know what it is yet.
Yeah.
And so this idea of the Bridge Collective is that there's a group of us who is kind of walking across the bridge and creating it as we go to a future that we haven't written yet. And, that was sort of the original kind of impulse and idea. And then it's just been a tremendous amount of downloads and information that's coming through. Jeff Kripal has said that in order to have a better future, we need to tell better stories. And that's what this is about as well. Like telling the stories for what we want to create, which is really, really tricky, like not in reaction to the things that aren't working. Coming into a new alive space that we're living into these new stories. And so the directive that I've been given is to hold this broad framework and offer the tools that I have and that I've accumulated over my journey, offer these tools and framework, and then let it be in a live space to see what is trying to emerge. I'm really excited about it. I don't know when this podcast will be out, but it starts July 7th. And the last day to join is July 1st. And so it's right around the corner. We have a really great group of people that are coming into it. And Yeah, I'm excited about it. It's a place of real surrender, a real trust fall for me to just lean into the guidance that I've been getting around it and the direction, and trust the people, trust the sophistication of the people coming into it, and explore what comes next. And I feel like it's a very, very, very early leading edge. It feels very, very new and very nascent, and we're going to be discovering it together, which is cool and weird and exciting and, hard and all the things. Yeah.
That's exciting. That's really exciting.
Yeah.
It feels like it's that same push that I was saying earlier about that wave, and that I love your bridge analogy and everything about that, and creating this new path forward. And that's what I feel like. There seems to be all these separate but connected communities starting to pop up. So like there's the experiencer group. Now you're going to have the Bridge Collective. I have my own like meditation group that has become like family. Really, it's really and it's really weird how it seems to organically build, and I find it pretty crazy. I'd love to talk about community building, since we're talking about how you're creating this new path forward. Is there a feeling of what type of communities that we're going to be starting to develop, maybe?
Yeah, I think that once again we come back to the emotional body, because we, in this area that I'm in, there were communes in the 70s, right? And when I like dramatically quit college and ran away to be in the world, I joined a commune in Florida. And, there's a lot of people that have tried sort of creating community, intentional community. And I think that what was missing then was the ability to be with ourselves and our emotions in a mature way, right? Like, it's really easy for these communities to break down. And I'm not even talking about living together in community, but even just like communities that you have, meditation groups, these close groups that become like family. I don't know if they were possible in the same way that they are now. It seems to me that learning all of the things that come with somatics and all the things that we've learned in the last 10 years about regulating our nervous systems and attachment styles. And, those aspects are vitally important if we're going to be in intimate community with each other. And that's going to be part of the Bridge Collective. Honestly, it's like, let's learn to hold our nervous systems, and let's learn to hold each other in a safe way. I think we have this is my complete bias, but I think we have a huge head start being experiencers, because you felt what that's like to be around. And maybe that would be any community that finds resonance with each other, who has a common language. And like you said, doesn't have to preface it by being like, okay, I know this is going to sound crazy, you guys, but we don't have to say that to each other, right? We just go, this is the thing that happened. And somebody else goes, wow, that happened to me too. It's like, wow, that's amazing. Yeah. And so building that kind of community with that level of trust and depth and nuance and maturity and ability to hold paradox, ability to not collapse the narrative into a certainty, into either or, this, that, like, is rare. And that's the kind of community that I have found as well, and that I'm, hoping to hold space for. A huge level of personal responsibility, that we each have to kind of like do our own work and show up as taken care of and resourced as we can show up, so that we can serve the community instead of causing rupture or chaos. And also learning good relational skills like communication and repair and it's all very unsexy, right? It's like, us all doing the work. You know what I mean? It's just like, which I said in the intro to your podcast, like the spoiler to the end of the podcast is like, get enough sleep, drink water, eat well, right? Like it's not it's not the things that we necessarily thought it would be, but it's like these foundational things that are necessary for us to go to the amazing, to the big places, to the mystical realms, to all of these other places, requires this really, really strong foundation.
Yeah, 100%. I 100% agree. It's amazing too, because I would have never guessed emotionally I would have been here before my NDE. I would have never guessed. I wouldn't even known this is possible, to be honest. Because I was so asleep that you didn't even know that there was anything else. It was just reaction after reaction after reaction. And I find that, like you were saying, creating this foundation, we're slowly figuring out how to create a stable foundation for a community. And that, like you were saying with the communication, is like, and being able to be honest and vulnerable is super difficult. Like, it's so crazy how difficult that is, and how much you almost need to keep doing it over and over again to start to get comfortable with it. And I think you're right with the experiencers. It's we've had to become super vulnerable with each other about the experiences we've had, because some of them are just weird, some of them are crazy, some of them are traumatic, some of them are amazing. And I find the vulnerable part and the self-responsibility, I think that's the toughest. But there's nothing sexy about any of it. It's actually just like ugly crying all the time. And like I was on the plane ride back, and a viewer sent me in a story she wrote, and it was extremely powerful. Like, and again, I would like to talk about timing, because it seems to be like the timing of that particular story. She had sent it a while ago. I hadn't been able to get to it. And then I read it on the plane ride here, and I couldn't put it down. And it was and she's an experiencer, and it was just so raw, so amazing that it really, really touched me. And it was about having like guides and a team and everything. And like, again, I keep going back to this. Like, a couple of years ago, I would have said it was bullshit. Even a couple of months ago, I was still having trouble with the idea of guides and like a team, like somewhere else, like in the spiritual realm, and I was still having trouble with it. And I'll just quickly tell you a little quick story. I was watching an NDE video of Julie Poole. I don't know if you've ever heard of her. She's like a medium or something. She was talking about, she had an extremely traumatic childhood in NDE. But she was talking about how her guides, if you want to make more contact, because I don't have I'm not that far ahead with being able to have a direct communication. And I don't know if that's myself or something else, but she was talking about how if you want, you can ask your guides to provide you with like some help, and you just ask them. And I said, I was like, well, I was like, it'd be interesting to talk to her. So I was like, okay. I was kind of like, okay, guides, if you're listening this time, because I've asked for a lot of things, but a lot of it's that you get what you need, not what you want. And so I said, I'd love to talk to her. And I asked for some help and stuff. And so I sent an email, and she said, no, it's not going to happen. I said, okay, that's fine. And then she sent an email again, like a minute after that. And it was, well, actually, my team just told me that I need to make some time for you. And I was like, what? Because that's very specific to what, like, I also had asked, I'd really like some like clear sign that you were part of it. She ended up having to cancel, but that was fine, because that's what I needed. I needed that clear guidance about that's not just us in this, because it felt, for most of my journey, like it was like I was alone. And then finally I met my partner, and she's been like a godsend for it. But do you find, do you have any communication with guides, and do you lean to them, or do you have any direct communication? How does that work for you? This is something that
is so foundational for me, and I think I talk about it all the time, but then when I engage with people, they're like, Well, I don't know what you're talking about. So I don't talk about it enough. Like I need to talk about it more on the podcast. And because I would also say, as you were talking about this, I was reminded, we were asking about grief or like how to move through these things and not doing it alone. Part of that is this unseen team. And you hear things, right? Like that's like you hear about guardian angels and we think, that would be nice. And, so I had a lot of really intense experiences my whole life, and many of them with, or I'll say 3 of them with this collective that would appear and speak and interact with me and scare the shit out of me and, all of these things. And, but I never put 2 and 2 together exactly until I started doing a regular practice with connecting with my guides. And through that practice and through the changes that have come with regular connection with these beings, as well as the work that I do with clients in helping them connect with their guides. My worldview, the lens that I see reality through is that we absolutely have a team. We have a team of disincarnate. We have a team, on the team are incarnate entities, your partner, a pet. It could include the dead. The dead can be on our team, like our own ancestors or someone that we loved. Non-human intelligence, local entities like the Fae. There's all of these potentials for connection with the unseen world, and like my team is a motley crew, right? It's a bunch of different types of beings and entities, and it took a while to believe in them, and what changed that for me was having relationality and deciding like, oh, these are distinct entities. These are actually beings. They have an agenda. And I think that part of their agenda is us. Like they have work to do. Yeah. They have their own spiritual development and work to do. And part of that is guiding us through this very confusing, amnesiatic, experience that we're having. We've forgotten everything and trying to remember and do really important stuff. And we've forgotten that we can even talk to them. And, so seeing them as distinct beings and treating them that way, like tending to that relationship as I would any other relationship that I really care about. So showing up and having, connecting with them regularly, giving offerings, asking. My understanding is that we have to ask for help, not out of not exactly like yes, free will, but also, you talked about this when you talked about your NDE on my podcast, talked about, like there's these points that we sort of need to hit in life. And there's a lot of different ways that we can get there. Right. And that somebody's paying attention and that we're kind of being nudged and guided. And that we can ask for overt help. We can say, the very, very basic, simple practice around this is like believe or just leap of faith, trust that you might have a disincarnate team. Make connection with them 2 times a day. Be like, hey, close team. Don't invite just anybody in, by the way. Like, I don't think that everybody in the unseen world should be invited in. There's opportunistic beings. There are beings that have not evolved out of taking advantage of other beings. Like, I don't think it's this wide open, like, hey, who's ever around, come here, show up. Like, no, let's not do that. Let's ask really specifically for our close, safe inner circle to interact with us. Second is we ask for help or guidance, or like you did, like, can I just have some proof or a sign? Because I am flagging here. Like I need some inspiration. I need, so we can ask them for things. Be consistent with the practice, like keep showing up and then say thank you. Just, and like build a relationship where we can begin to trust and begin to learn the language. sometimes some people talk about their guides coming to them in songs or in synchronicities, or, for some reason, I've gone through a real kind of portal in the past few months. And for some reason, like, my tarot cards have never been better. And it's a very easy way for them to communicate with me, because I am very familiar with those cards. I have a relationship with them. I use them a lot. And so when I ask questions and I ask them of my team and guides, it's a real easy way for them to communicate with me. Dreams, ask for a dream. Just ask. So, I have a lot to say about guides and teams, and I think it's a matter of, don't worry if you don't know who they are, and just do an experiment as an act of faith to see if they show up like you did. And, every time that happens, when you ask for something and you receive a reply, trust builds, and then you have proof.
Yeah.
And then trust builds and trust builds and trust builds. So then when they tell you something really weird or bullshit or hard, or it's like, okay, I have all this trust built up in them, I guess I better listen to what they're saying, Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Cause I was, as you were talking about that, I was thinking about my own communications and stuff. And I was thinking about angel numbers. And then I glanced down there's a timer here, and it was, we had been talking for 1 hour and 2 minutes and 22 seconds. And I was like, thank you.
Yeah.
And there's been quite a few, what you said about this building trust, because, after this recent incident happened, I started remembering it made me remember all these last couple years when I'd ask for something, and for sure they would show up, actually. And it would always be pretty overt. Like for me, there was this one, it was early on, probably only a couple months after my NDE, and I was listening to James I. Andoli, and I think it was either the metaverse or his Engaging the Phenomenon. I can't remember who he was talking to. But they were talking about asking for signs and stuff. And I remember asking again, and I remember going, okay, I really need to know I'm not going crazy. I really need a strong sign. And I needed it to be super personal. And I was in my crane. I was in a job I hated. I was sitting in the crane, and I look over, and there's cloud formation. I'll probably put this in the episode too. There's this cloud formation, and to me, it was like instantly, I know what this looks like, and it was a cloud that looked like Aries, and it sat there for a half an hour, not moving. All the other clouds moved around it. That one didn't move, and I kept looking at it, and I was still super skeptical. Even though I'd had that NDE, but I was like, okay, that's pretty impressive. And to me, it was super personal. When I show it to other people, they're like, it's just a weird cloud. No, right. Man, you don't understand.
Right. Yeah.
So what kind of signs for you, for that stand out in your memory from your guides?
Well, the times that they've showed up I've had 2 times that they've shown up in physical space with me. And, those were pretty big, right? Like, these beings to show up in the world with you. And the first one was, definitely could be contested. I was blackout drunk, and I walked, I have no memory of that entire night. It was like the deepest part of my alcoholism. It was a really, really dark time in my life. And I stepped out of the bedroom, and it had this very old house, and it had, like this brick step. And I stepped out of it, and I fell. And in that moment, everything went to slow motion, and they were there. And the beings that I interact with are called the 4 who are one. Those are some of my guides, because they show up in this collective. These 4 beings sort of melded together in this collective. And as I was falling, in my book, I used the phrase urgent compassion. There was this urgent compassion.
Yep.
And they said it was this or something worse. And they basically stopped me in my tracks. I broke my right ankle, badly sprained my left ankle, didn't know it, walked around on it the rest of the night so that the next day it couldn't be cast. It was horrendous. It was my rock bottom, and it was the last day I took a drink. I'm coming up on 8 years sobriety. And thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's pretty fucking great. Yeah, thank you. Anybody who's like, great. Yeah, anybody who's in like year 2 and they're like, oh, it's like, it gets just better and better and better. Worth every minute. So that was a big one. It was this or something worse. Like they stopped me in my tracks. The other big one, I feel weird talking about it, even though it's in my book. It's like such a like bizarre, big experience. But on 111, like the number synchronicities drive me crazy. They feel so stupid, but they're there, they're there, whatever. Yeah. I love them too, but I'm always just like, really, is this? I know I need to like soften my skeptical side around that. But on January 11th, 2020,
accurate.
They are. They really are. Yeah. It happens all the time. Yeah. It happens all the time. Yeah. I always roll my eyes when it happens, but it happens all the time. So January 11th, 2021, started with I won't tell the whole story. It's a long story, but started with an intense out of body experience. And one of the most profound that I've had, and then came back into my bedroom and came back in sideways, like my body was sideways across the bed instead of the way that I had been sleeping, which was on my back. So it was sideways. I was really, had a very hard time sitting up. It really hurt to open my eyes, everything. My eyes felt very heavy. The room felt very weird. I felt very heavy. I reached over to click on my lights. I had these like fairy lights behind my bed as a headboard. And I reached over to click those on and they didn't come on. And I was like, oh, that's weird. I guess the power's out. And then I reached for my phone to put, this is like pre-dawn, like very, very early dawn. I reached for my phone to put the, what do you call it? Flashlight. There you go. Yeah. To turn on the flashlight on the phone. That didn't work either. And so when that didn't work, I sort of looked up, I looked to my left, and it was everywhere I looked was this honeycomb structure. And each cell of the honeycomb was filled with different amounts of information. So some of them were completely filled in. Some of them had these like squares, different patterns. And so I looked away from that and looked to my right, and it faded away as I looked away from it. And then it appeared when I looked to my right. And it felt strange and sort of non-organic, which is a weird thing to say, but I turned my head and looked forward, and out of the bedroom wall, walked these 4 beings, and they came and stood next to my bed. And I said, am I not in my body? I very much felt like I was in my body, but I said, am I not in my body? And I felt like they were super annoyed by that question. They were like, Jesus Christ, man, like, this took a lot of trouble. This is a lot of work for us to make this happen. You need to learn to ask better questions. And so then they downloaded me with all this information. They said, this is behind the scenes. They didn't do air quotes, but it was air quotes. This is behind the scenes of reality. Yep. Reality responds to where you place your attention and the quality of your attention. And you learn to use the operating system of your reality. And I said, I need to get back into my body. And then like snap of the fingers, they were gone. The room was normal. The light was normal. The honeycomb matrix, which is what I call it. The honeycomb matrix was gone. And that directive from them, this is behind the scenes of your reality. Reality responds based on the quality of your attention and where you place your attention. Yep. Learn to use the operating system of your reality. That directive has been unfolding through time, and I'm learning about it more and more and more. It's why I'm in the Buddhist lineage that I'm in. It's why I'm studying what I'm studying, doing the practices I'm doing. it is about manifestation, which super annoys me because I have like an allergy to that, but that's exactly what it's about. And that was, those were the biggest points of context I've had with my guides. Lately, it's been, they don't appear to me, but I can hear them really clearly. So when I'm on the cushion in meditation or in dreams or, it's been really, really loud. They've been very loud lately. And I'm really grateful for that. But, this unfolded over years. Like it didn't, when I first started communicating with them, it wasn't this clear or easy. Like I think it's a language that we learn over time.
I agree. I just I jotted some notes while you're talking because it was funny too, because it's like you've been reading my mind lately for the last 20 minutes because I have a question and then you answer it so it's been kind of funny. So when you were talking about the four who are one, I was reminded of the cross and then you said Jesus Christ.
Unfortunately, I said it as a swear word probably. But,
it doesn't matter. Okay.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Right.
I was wondering, as the entities, the four who are one, do you see any type of symbolism other than them being a collective? Because when I was reading your book, actually, I didn't read your book. I'm terrible at reading books. I actually listened, which I think was
great.
I loved it because it was you were saying it with your lovely voice. But it reminded me of the cross, and I'm not a religious person per se. I was actually allergic to religion for many, many, many years, and I'm slowly becoming more comfortable with religion now. But for some reason, it reminds me of a cross. So there's the 4 points that are one, and I don't know if that resonates with you at all. Not quite sure why I was going to say it.
Yeah. It's really interesting. It resonates differently for different people. I'll say that, and I kind of know that that's what the book does. It's like people hear and translate it in a way that's personal to them and makes sense. And that's, I think, by design. So the only other, I don't know, a lot of people reach out to me and they're like, have you thought that the four who are one are this? Have you thought that they're that? It's like, makes sense. And I haven't thought that, so I think it's, the only thing that, I've had people say, like the four elements,
like tarot. Oh, that's interesting. I like that.
Yeah. So I've had a lot of people say a lot of different things about who they are. I have, my best guess that is who knows, right? Comes from my own regression where it was a between life regression where I went, to this planet that wasn't Earth that I typically incarnate on instead of here. And and they were there and they were like, guiding me on sort of the mission for this lifetime. And that's the closest idea I have as to who they are. I do not know. I don't know.
That's the fun part. And which kind of, so I know we talked about this on your podcast, but I've been trying to view pretty much everything as symbolism. So I just finished Carl Jung's Red Book, and I just finished his UFO one, and he was talking about symbolism and how it kind of all relates to like manifestation and that almost like we had touched on this earlier about this quantum reality and that maybe, and there's hints that we're almost like quantum computers that are able to directly affect our reality with thought and about our intention. And when you're talking about this honeycomb matrix, it instantly, and this might be because I just watched it with my partner. It was the first time we watched it together, and God, I love that movie. But The Matrix and the scenes in, I believe it's the second one where he talks to the architect, and they show all the different screens and of all these different realities or instances of Neo. And it kind of reminded me of this honeycomb matrix that you were talking about, because it has all these different information. Can you talk a little bit more about the honeycomb matrix and this underlying operating system structure?
Yeah. It's really right. So here's the thing about this is why I have a hard time with this is why I'm annoyed with my guides when they bring me this shit, right? So part of it is if we could just think our reality different, we would, right? Yeah. We would all think war away. We would all point our attention at something and stop suffering. We would do it immediately. It's the first thing that we would do. So it's tricky because it doesn't exactly work like that, right? And yet it also does, right? And yet if we can get, that's why I personally think that developmental work in addition to spiritual work is really important, because if we are creating our realities with a bunch of shadows, and this isn't necessarily shadow stuff, but one thing I really loved in your regression that we did together was when you got to your room, right, into the meditation room, which was sort of like that space in the Matrix where you can sort of call up anything. And your guide was like, no more Ferraris, no more, I don't know what else you had in there, millions of dollars and whatever. It's right. Focus on something different. I think it has to do with love. I really think that it has to do with love. I think it has to do with what kind of world do we want to create? Nothing wrong with Ferraris, right? Or what was it? A Lamborghini? I can't remember.
It was a Corvette.
A Corvette. Okay, cool. Yeah. You should get a Corvette, right? No shade against Corvettes. We should have, we get to have, I do think that abundance is possible. I do think that it's okay that we have these things. It's nothing against that. It is.
It can't be the focus.
It can't be the focus. And it's, I want to start over with that question.
Sure.
Can I do that? Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Because I really need to think about it, and I'm not on the right track. I'm not on the track. Yeah, it's not. It sucked.
No, I actually thought it was actually pretty great, because it was kind of where I was going in my head.
Was it? Yeah. Well, maybe you're influencing me. I'm I'm reading your mind, and it's right. You're let's talk about this. No. Yeah. Gosh, it's such a weird thing that I don't have an easy answer to this. It's, I do see the results of where I place my attention and the quality of my attention changing my reality. I see the results of that. And also, it's not just I can think myself XYZ, but maybe we can at some point. Maybe at some point, if we get good at it, we can manifest that quickly and easily. I didn't know how little I knew about this until you asked me that question. Wow, I don't know. I don't have an opinion on this. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's fun too.
It's fun. It's fun.
The reason that I ask is because I've been thinking about this a ton, and about abundance, and that because money is just energy. It's just a representation of energy. And if we can affect our reality, we can affect the energy. Means that if we, like attracts like, or opposites attract, or however this manifestation works. I've been thinking a lot about manifestation. And I'm kind of allergic to the word too. But it does feel like manifestations, whatever this is accelerating, and they're becoming faster. I don't know if this makes sense to you. So the manifestations seem to be accelerating. My thoughts seem to be reflected in the outer world faster than they were. So before, it would take like when I first started doing this, like right after my NDE, a thought, and I didn't really recognize it as that until recently. But it would take months, and now it seems to be like you'll get a response from the universe extremely fast now. So it's like sometimes minutes, sometimes it's hours, sometimes it's days, but it still seems very fast.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that I did an episode just like 2 episodes ago, and it was about that we're getting trained, and we've talked about this before when I had my regression about being children on a playground.
Yeah.
And I wonder if we're getting trained in order to, and this kind of relates to this honeycomb matrix about how we have to know how to operate the underlying structure. I know you mentioned it on I forget which episode it was. You were talking about how to figure out how you can create abundance in your life. Was it through manifestation, or was it through an alternate way of, instead of how society is built? And have you been thinking about that?
I'm not sure exactly which episode it was. I can't remember. So I don't remember saying that, but as you were talking, I think I did sort of land on like what I think about this stuff, right? Which I think is, I think we'll see. I don't know why it's so like tricky and slippery for me right now, but it really is. So everything that they told me kind of gave me the clues for this, right? And so the clues are where you place your attention and the quality of your attention. And so what I've discovered is that by developing focus and placing my attention on something, I do see those reflections that you're talking about, and that they can happen pretty quickly. And what ultimately it is, though, what I've really started to see, and it's very weird and it's hard and I haven't wrapped my head around it yet, but it's actually a beingness, so if it's my state of being that gets reflected or that puts me into what I've been calling a slipstream. So if I pay attention to how I'm being, to this like state of presence, state of being, and it's sort of light and it's not very serious, it's kind of playful and it's grounded, and it's just this particular frequency sort of that I can embody. Yeah. And when I'm in that, the slipstream is pretty incredible. Like all of these synchronicities, everything unfolds in these miraculous ways. And, I was thinking, I had an experience a couple weeks ago where I was thinking about money, and thinking my dad always carries like a crisp $100 bill in his wallet as sort of like a talisman, like a totem. And he's like, this is how I make money. I carry, and he's not a like woo guy, at all, but he has this sort of like superstition. He keeps this and he never ever spends it. He just keeps it in his wallet. And he's like, it just multiplies in there. I just get more money because there's money in there. So I was thinking like, oh yeah, that $100 bill in my wallet. I wonder if and I was thinking, how do I get $100 bill? Because my bank isn't local and I could go to the ATM, but they give me 20s. And how am I going to? So that thought sort of flashed through my mind, probably less than 30 seconds. But I was in this state of presence, this state of, this state of being, this particular frequency of being, and went into the world, had all of these like really bizarre, super fun synchronicities experiences, very flow, easy, really enjoyable. Went into a thrift store, which I hadn't gone into and hadn't planned to go into, but I was like, oh, I'm going to pop in this thrift store for a second. Walked in there. One of my students is in there, and she looks at me and says, oh, Robin, I owe you $100. And in my head, I'm like, I don't think that you do. I don't think that you do owe me. Like, I have no idea that you owed me money, none of that. She goes, oh, I owe you $100. And she handed me a crisp $100 bill. So it's that. And it's tricky. It's like, I wasn't looking for $100 bill. I didn't sit down and be like, give me $100 bill, give me $100 bill. Like, please, 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 universe, bring me $100 bill. It was like that thought crossed through my mind. I was in a particular state of being that felt like what somebody would call the flow. And then reality mirrored that back to me. And then the whole rest of the day was like that, just preposterous synchronicity after synchronicity, you know? So I guess that's what I have. That's, you know, what is the quality of my attention? It was like a lightness of being. Where was I putting my focus? It's actually on presence. Like I was very present with everybody that I was interacting with. And, you know, so it does seem like there's this magic sweet spot, that where we can see that mirror, that reflection happening faster. And if we think of reality as like an algorithm that is just responding to us, kind of like social media does, like what we look at, we see more of, you know? Yeah. So if we look at, like you were saying about the habit or the addiction of self-loathing, it's then the mind starts looking for that and looking for the like reasons for that and the underlying structure of that. And if we're looking for something else, if we're looking for like, oh, I'm going to step into the world, I'm this person today, I'm going to hold this frequency, I feel light, I feel good, you know, and then something happens and then we look for the next thing to happen and we look for the next thing to happen and it starts to happen that way. Yeah. If I had when I figure out the formula, I'll let you know. I'll come back. I'll be like, I got it. I figured it out.
Well, it's funny too, because I've been thinking about this. Like I've fallen down this path too, and I was going to ask you if, because I feel like not just where your attention is, but emotion. And when that thought went through your mind, was there an emotion tied to it?
I mean, it was. Yeah, like it was lightness, it was love, an appreciation of my dad, and like joy in his idiosyncrasy that he, you know, liked to do this. Like, yeah, it was that. It wasn't like, oh, Jesus, I really need $100, or like, how can I, you know, it wasn't that. It wasn't this sort of like grasping, pushing energy. It was, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where I feel like, I think we're on the same page where, because I've been trying to figure out this too, because it really feels like there's your attention, there's the emotion that's tied to it, there's the love and joy and that magical feeling. And so my flow state, so I call it the flow. So it's I guess mine's water. I have tons of dreams about water and everything. So mine is a flow state, and mine especially when I'm driving. I find I need to have my mind, my body engaged and listening to really loud music in order for me to, like, I'm really in the flow when I'm in traffic, which is really bizarre. I love it. So do you find, I don't know where I was going with this. Fuck. I have to edit this one out too.
I'm rubbing off on you. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know where I was going to go with this. About this flow state. Maybe we can talk about your stream. You called it the stream? No.
Slipstream. The slipstream. Yeah.
Slipstream.
Yeah. It just feels like.
How does.
Yeah.
No,
it's.
My mind.
Yeah. Okay. You know, it's kind of this idea again of timelines. You know, like one small decision to go left instead of right, or to say this instead of that, and sometimes we can't catch the decisions that clearly. Oh man, I have a good story. So after the slipstream day, where all of these amazing things happened, right? The next day, I woke up and I was not in that state. I was in this sort of like graspy, wanted to get a need met, you know, sort of addictive, like not connected, just woke up in this kind of pushing energy and sort of desperate needing energy. And so what I should have done, what my plan for the day was before, was to get up and go for a walk and then do my practices, my meditation, and then work before my first client. And instead, I was like, I'm just going to run to town, which is a big deal. I live 30 minutes outside of town. So I'm just going to run to town, meet this need, like go see if I can find this thing, and sort of force the slipstream. I was like, I'm just going to go. That was so fun. I just want to have that experience again.
Yeah.
So I got in my truck, and I have a little dog. She's a year old, and she loves to go with me. And I was like, oh, I'll take my tree. And she can come with. So open up the door, call her. She runs over, jumps in. And I didn't know this, until later, but she had just eaten a mouse, which is gross. Didn't know that, but like got in the truck, forcing this slipstream in this very sort of urgent energy, driving down the road, and she throws up in my truck. And so the entire rest of the day was like that. It was like cleaning up puke. I think I had a conflict with someone that I normally don't have a conflict with. I like stubbed my toe or something. It was like that. Like the whole day was off. So I call that like the puke reality versus like the slipstream reality. That it's very different, right? It's like it does have something to do with our state of being, and it gets more and more subtle, is my experience. Like I should have stayed home, done my practices, got on the cushion, went for a walk, and got to work. My day would have been, that is a timeline shift. I chose the puke timeline, which is what I call it now when I make that bad decision. Yeah.
I love that, because it's really interesting, because so like this last week has been super interesting for me, because I went to go visit my partner, and we had trigger after trigger after trigger, and we were talking about this briefly before we started recording. But I found it really interesting that there's all these triggers, and it's like you say, you can make a choice. So you can either feel sorry for yourself, or do my old pattern, which was typically reacting emotionally, thinking the worst could happen or anything. Or you can think that, oh no, actually it might actually go pretty good. Like it'll work out. Even if there is something that doesn't work out, it's going to be fine anyways. That just, it'll all work out. And so like I was telling you, I had my allergic reaction, which I haven't had in a couple of years. She'd never actually experienced that joyful thing. And then this morning, I accidentally deleted. So I'm using Riverside here, and I have a whole bunch of recordings that I have, and I hadn't actually downloaded one previously, and I accidentally deleted everything. And I was instantly panicked, and I was thinking,
I feel your pain. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, oh no, like I haven't downloaded it, and it's gone. And my instant reaction was to panic and all this stuff. And I went, no, it's fine. It's going to work out. And we ended up, my partner was like Googling like how we could get back, and I ended up just doing a chat, and I ended up coming back. So everything was fine. And then in the I had to go to work this morning, and there's this big health and safety meeting we had to do. And there was supposed to be me, my work partner, and my boss also there. And not both of them didn't end up showing up. And normally, and this was 3 health and safety people, and normally, because there was an incident, normally this would be pretty intimidating for me. Like I'm like, I'm not confident. I need some backup and everything. And so this time I walked in there, and I was like, no, actually, I got this. I know what I'm doing. Everything's gonna be fine, which is new for me, like super new, about self-confidence. And it ended up working actually really well. So it's just like this day that I've been encountering triggers, like actually this whole week, I've been encountering triggers and actively trying to change the emotional response I have to them. Do you find with your own triggers, are you becoming aware of your triggers more and seeing them more, and then actively choosing not to go the puke route, but going the joyful, fun route?
Yeah. It's like the $100 bill route or the puke route. Yeah. Definitely.
It's really clear.
Yeah. yeah, for many years working, truly like starting with therapy and understanding and build, and then meditation and practices to make more space between the trigger and the reaction, all of that. And also lately seeing it as, like you say, coming into a place of choice rather than a place of reaction is huge. It's enormous. Like, we don't often, like, for a really long time, we don't have choice. The body sort of takes over. We feel really unsafe, and we just play out the pattern that we're used to playing out. And it feels like lately there is more choice. There's more space, and I still screw up, 100%. Like, I still get caught in the habit that's really deep and intrinsic and takes a lot to see. But yeah, more and more and more, absolutely. And I've had moments of really wrestling with it, like really watching myself and being like, okay, this is the way that you've done it. You could do that. And you kind of know how that ends. And it all feels true, right? It's like you want to get invested in that story, that way. And so the draw to get reinvested in that way of being versus like, or I could try something different. And how hard that is. It's really, really hard. But then finding something new on the other side, like choosing to do it differently, and then going like, oh, something new and different happened. And what a blessing that is when we've been stuck in our patterns and habits and replaying the same traumas and creating the same stories. And, I couldn't have come to the point where I can make those choices without doing the work around the emotional body.
Yeah,
that's right. I mean, do you remember a time in your life when it wasn't even like it wasn't possible to make a different choice?
Yeah, like 2 years ago.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Like, yes, yeah, same. Right. Yeah, like it's brand new. Yeah.
Yeah, this is realizing that how much of my ingrained patterns were controlling my life was pretty crazy. And then how hard it is to change those patterns, even when you recognize them. And I don't think we talk like I'm listening to Joe Dispenza's Becoming Supernatural. And have you read that?
Yeah. Yeah. I know all about Joe Dispenza. Yeah. Yeah. I accidentally, I think, have 3 copies of his book on my shelf. So yes.
It's never an accident.
Right.
Yeah. And he talks about how you have to have like, I don't think he talks enough about how hard it is actually to, even once you recognize a pattern, how hard it is to change them.
Right.
Some of the patterns like seem impossible to change, and then slowly, and this is where I come with this triggers it's like everything else. It seems that we get the same sort of trigger, even though it's hidden through a different mechanism, how it arrived to you, but it's the same sort of trigger. And it's this exposure effect where you constantly get exposed to these different emotional triggers until you're able to start making these new choices. And then once you've learned this lesson, then you can start moving on. Yeah, I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. And I think that, and I've heard actually there's a woman that I follow her work. Her name is Irene Lyon, and she does a lot of somatic work, and I really respect her and what she puts out there. And I think that I've heard her say this, and I believe this as well. Like something like Joe Dispenza's work or like manifestation work, like we were talking about, works for some people and doesn't work for other people. Right.
That's right.
And why is that? And my experience with Joe Dispenza's work, which I think is amazing, like it really is groundbreaking, scientific, amazing, is kind of what you're saying. Like when my emotional body was not safe, I wasn't changing the neurobiology as I was doing these exercises. I was still in a state of fight, flight, fear. And I couldn't talk myself out of it, or I couldn't think myself out of it. I couldn't just be like, just stop feeling this way. Just be different. It really did take doing the emotional body work to, like you say, this exposure therapy to the trigger, to being willing to, and safe. Like my understanding with your partners, you guys are safe enough to go through these experiences, and that sense of safety that develops so that you can process things, have an emotional reaction, learn to be with the emotional body in a way that we didn't know how to be, develop safety in the nervous system, ends up at the same place that Joe Dispenza's work. And then I think his work can catch. But when we're in trauma, when we're just in a giant trauma response that's been going on for years, it may be possible for some people to like meditate their way out of that, or do that work to get out of that. I think if he combined emotional, like somatics work and emotional work with what he does, it's the ticket. Like that's the thing. That's what manifestation needs, is the emotional body, and shadow work, like clearing up our shadows, clearing up our constructs, our baggage, our bad habits, ethics, the bullshit, like getting that clean, so that the mirror that we're asked, like, so that what's reflecting to us is that, instead of, all of our, all the things that we can't exactly see about ourselves, but are informing us all the time. Like you said, being run by your habits, being run by your patterns and baggage. And we all have that, right? We just become more and more and more conscious of it, then make different choices. And it's like training our neurobiology to be able to keep making different choices. Yeah. I have opinions on things.
Yeah, I love that.
So that's what happens when you ask me questions. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great.
I'll go for it.
Yeah. I find it, I think that's where we're headed. I think we're only literally at the beginning. And I think everything that we've been talking about, I think it's there for a reason why we're talking about it. And that the more work we do, and it's the hardest work, the more we're going to be able to access, the more we're going to be able to manifest, the more, like, it just seems like this is the evolution of where we're going. And I find that exciting and joyful, and I'm super stoked.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's good. It's hopeful. I mean, I think in your story, and definitely in my story, there were years where I didn't think change was possible. We're just feeling stuck, being in the dark, not having a way forward. And there are lots and lots of people like that are experiencing that right now, right? Like that stuckness, and finding that through it's only the hardest work you've ever done. That's the price of entry, right? It's just the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. But if you do that, it gets easier and easier, and we get more capacity. It becomes more fun. But similar to to you going through that NDE, and then the changes that you made in your life, like really struggling to make those changes and going through, it's not possible to say in a few words how hard those times are. And I went through them too. Like the grief it's easy to talk about now as something like beautiful, alchemical, powerful, like a portal. Those things are all true. Those are true. Yeah. And also, ugly crying on the floor for days on end, feeling like you're going to die, like your guts are, going to come up. Like it's the worst. So it's not easy, but it's worth it. And it gets easier and easier and easier, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I really remember laying on the couch, crying my eyes out, listening to Shine Down on repeat, just dying while the kids were at school.
Right. Just dying. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and then but looking back, like I'm super happy for those moments now, which is it's so like when you're in the shit, if somebody said like, and I heard it from a bunch of people I was listening to, and I was like, fuck you, man. Like this is like,
that's right.
Like, that doesn't fucking help me right now. And the only thing I can always remember, like the only thing that everybody always says is like, you'll literally get through it. Like you get that you have that 100% survival rate. Like you've made it through everything else, but fuck is it? It's not fun and it's not easy. But now I've got to the, like we were talking about just before we started, was like you're out. I'm almost looking forward to the harder times now, because I know, like you were saying to me, that's where we know where like a lot of growth is, and that's so weird to think about.
Right.
Just looking back, even just a couple of years ago, going, "Fuck, no way! What? Why would you want that?" And I was just wondering, if you could comment on that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, so I have all these kind of like catchphrases that have come up in my work, and one of them is first fuck you, which is what we're talking about when like when we say to ourselves, like, just get over it. It's going to be, you incarnated to have this experience, or, your soul wanted growth like this. So that's why you got cancer. It's like, well, first of all, fuck you. Okay. Like, let's just start there. Like, it's because that's the source of spiritual bypassing, right? Is this access to this higher view without having gone through the experience of the grief. That's the higher view is true and real. So that's why it's just first fuck you. Like, we're going to get there. I'm going to do the thing. But like, first of all, I'm not going to abandon myself anymore and bypass around the fact that this is really, really hard. And actually it is that aligning with the most vulnerable parts of ourselves and having our own back that gets us to a place where this becomes fun. This is something I say as well. Like, you can't hate yourself. I'll say it for me. I couldn't hate myself enough to become someone I would love. I tried to like self-hate myself into being a person that I could love and respect. And it just didn't work. It was me, committing acts of violence on myself over and over again, abandoning myself, not believing myself, not taking myself seriously, not centering. We're full of like little inner children. We're full of all these different aspects of self that are wounded and are holding trauma and holding wounds, and we treat them terribly. And so that's the first step. Sounds like a cliche, but it's learning to love ourselves, to take care of ourselves, to not abandon ourselves. And through that process, all of our parts start to become safe enough to be, instead of being in survival mode, it's like, oh, now they're down for adventure. It's like, okay, I'm feeling safe enough. Like, now let's be the fool in the tarot again, and step off the edge of the cliff and see what comes. And we're going to be the hero on the hero's journey. We're going to be Inanna, who chooses to go down to the underworld because we are resourced enough. We feel safe enough. And then we go through, like you said, it's the hero's journey isn't just once. There's a great, great movie called Finding Joe. I can't remember who the filmmaker is, but you know that movie? Yeah. It's just the best. It's really sweet. And it has all these principles in it. I've watched it on repeat at times in my life. And one of the guys in that movie says, if you're wise, you'll keep doing this. You'll keep going on this journey. You'll keep dying and being reborn over and over again, because that's where the gold is. And it's, again, if you tell somebody that at the wrong time, that's when the first fuck you comes in. It's like, don't say that to somebody who's on the floor, but once we like get this groove and understand how this works, then it is fun. It's like, I mean, I hate to say this. I'm not asking for anything to be like visited upon me, but I've had moments, in the past year where it's like, wow, things are so good. Is this the edge of like, have I arrived somewhere? Thank goodness. No, don't worry. But having that feeling of like you said, sort of excited for the friction, because I know that's like, we know that's where the growth is, and the growth becomes really fun. And then the like reality opens up in a completely different way that we never could have imagined on the other side of this threshold that we've crossed. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. The only thing I'd add is that the faster you look at your triggers, the faster you just like look at the hard things, the faster it gets over with. So instead, and I noticed for myself, I used to like some of the shit it would just drag on and on because I was resisting so much.
Right.
The easier way, because the easier way is just go straight at it and right through, and it's way faster. And I'm a big fan of efficiency. So.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I had this weird thought, and I was like, I'm not going to do that. And then you mentioned it too.
Okay.
So I had this weird thought that it might be fun, is if you would, I don't know if you're up for this, but doing a tarot reading.
Oh man. Yeah. Can we decide if we're going to keep it or not?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. And for you want me to do a tarot reading for you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool.
I'd actually like to show you my tarot box because I have a fun story.
Okay, cool. I'll grab my cards too.
At the same time.
Oh, wow.
So my dad has a tarot box that looks oddly similar to, it's like a twin of this one. And he got it when he was really young. He used to do tarot, like he's a very good tarot reader, but he stopped right before I was born. And we didn't touch him for 40 years. Well, 36 years. And in the farmhouse, my mom was clearing out the farmhouse because it's full of shit. And she found this in there, and it fits my tarot cards perfectly. So, yeah. So
amazing.
I have.
What tarot deck do you have?
This deck. Yeah, it's fun.
King of Coins, King of Pentacles. Yeah. All right. Well, let's see how this goes. I do tarot readings for people, usually around specific questions, right? It's generally not kind of open-ended or just kind of, but we can. Do you have something?
What? I usually go for myself. So when I'm doing my own readings, I usually go, what do I need to know right now?
Okay. So I have this really beautiful deck that used to really intimidate me. It's called the Weaver Tarot.
Ooh.
And it's all black. It's like the cards are black. And it was very, very intimidating. Yeah, for a long time. And then we'll see if I can do this with the mic in my way. But now I really, really trust this deck and I love it. So what does Sean need to know right now? Let's see. Gotta get this. With this deck, all of my decks want to be used differently. Do you have that? Or you only have one deck?
No, I have two decks. So I have the Hermetic deck, which is the one I started with. My daughter ended up using it now. And then I have this deck, so my Hermetic deck, I used while I was in that really dark space. And I'd get readings I really freaking hated. And I had the thing, I was like, I really fucking hate tarot.
Why is it always the Tower and the Ten of Swords? Jeez, like what's wrong with this deck, you know?
Yeah. And then sure as shit, it's like that self-fulfilling prophecy. And something would happen. I'm like, oh, fuck, I hate tarot.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, so now I use this new deck, which I really like. It's light and playful, and I can just have fun with it. That other one's so serious.
Yeah. I definitely have different decks that I use. Like I need a gentle message today, so let's do the gentle deck. Like I 100% do that. Yeah. So, lovely, Two of Cups and the Star card. Yeah. So yay for your relationship. Yeah.
Yay. Yeah.
Pretty simple, but yeah, that's a very simple. So Two of Cups.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
And the Star card. And I'm grateful for my team and my guides in this deck because they're like, let's just keep this simple.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Just say hi to your partner for me, basically. Yeah.
I will. Yeah, I will. For sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for doing that. I think that was pretty fun, actually.
That was fun.
if I think I've taken up enough of your time. Is there anything else? Any closing comments? What did you say to me when it was like any wise words or nuggets of wisdom?
No pressure, right?
Yeah, just change the world, Robin.
Damn.
You can use your favorite saying, fuck you.
Right. First, fuck you. Yeah. No, it was really fun, Sean. Thank you. I had a really good time on the podcast. Yeah. That was great. I do want to say, like, I'm terrible at kind of self-promotion, but I do want to say that I've been doing a lot of Meet the Guides sessions lately. And it's basically, you went through a session with me. It's like being guided into a place of that feels like a meditative state. So it's just kind of guided into a relaxed state and then guided into an experience that sort of unfolds completely inside of you, right? And then I'm just asking questions and sort of providing guide rails. And I do a session like that that's specifically around meeting our guides and getting that connection going so that it kind of jumpstarts that process that we were talking about of just getting in touch with the guides. So that's kind of what I want to put out there that is on the table because they've been so good and weird and fun lately. So if people are interested in that, they can find me. I know, good and weird and fun is good. So robinlassiter.com, or I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes. Any wise words? There's just it. To me, this entire journey is about learning to love ourselves enough that we can be helpful in the world and be of service. And when we learn to love ourselves enough, then we can love each other. And we're all just like, I think Ram Dass said it, he said, we're all just walking each other home. I say, we're all just loving each other home. And that's the point of all of this. That's the point of all of this. So, and thank you. That was really fun, Sean. I had a really good time.
That was fun. I love that. Though I will say that the journey that you provided me is in like the top 3 experiences of my life. It's been monumental in my growth. So to anyone who's considering it, 100% 5-star Yelp review for Robin. And please check out her podcast, buy the book, check out the Bridge Collective because I think it's just amazing. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, thank you. This has been a blast.
Yeah, and a lot of fun.
I think thanks everyone for watching, and we'll talk. We'll see you guys next time.